Oi, oi, all right. How's it going? I'm Grant, you're you. This is the Doodle Review coming through with a new album to give a spin, chat some fraff about, and assign an arbitrary score to. Today it's the turn of the Black Keys. Bit of an older album, came out a few months ago. Just catching up to it now. Thought I would drop my thoughts. I think you should check out my newsletter if you're interested in my reviews, just because I cover a broader range of artists and genres. Comes out once a week. There's a few of you now that are doing that, which is really cool to see, building a little community there. If you want to join it, go into the description, find the link, click it, put your email in, and boom, you're subscribed. All right, let's get into No Rain, No Flowers. Returning after a fairly shambolic year of tour cancellations, management firings, and spurious nicotine crypto sponsorships, the Black Keys are back. What's more surprising to me than this like almost instantaneous return is how Patrick Carney and Dan Auerbach seem almost none the wiser as to how to recapture the charm they once had or what fans really want from them. Surprisingly, for a band that had lacked any sort of acclaim in their discography for the best part of a decade, out of all the things that went south for them in 2024, their album Ohio Players wasn't really one of them. Sure, it remains squarely focused on appeasing the widest possible audience with nothing remotely resembling an edge and a real far cry from the crunchy garage blues rock of their early days, but an open invitation to collaborators from Beck to Noel Gallagher to Juicy J and Lil Noid made for a fairly vibrant palette and some toe tappers that were more interesting than the pentatonic autopilot of some of the previous records. Don't get me wrong, I don't think fans were really asking for any of what they got on Ohio Players, but as modern Keys albums go, this one wasn't terrible. When it came to touring, the somewhat decent album, though, it's pretty clear there had been some miscalculations over the number of people interested in seeing the Keys play these new tunes and their willingness to pay hundreds of bucks for the privilege. Months after ticket sales went live, arenas were way undersold, leading to the whole run being cancelled and the band parting ways with their managers shortly after that. I think it's pretty admirable, crypto show aside, that the duo got straight back on the horse, jumping into the studio to prep an album for another more reasonably sized and priced tour. What I think is strange is that Auerbach and Carney didn't use this opportunity for a kind of back to their roots style comeback. Purely for strategic reasons. Let's just forget the artistry for a moment. Could say Black Keys did that a while ago. The duo behind this band love making a buck and make no secret about it. And something that in an industry of people afraid to say that sort of thing, I kind of respect. Being savvy businessmen, they must recognize that next to sex, which no one's looking at these guys to associate with these guys, nothing sells like a good narrative, one with a rise, fall, and then redemption. So after years of two-man blues stomping, a slightly broader production on Brothers and El Camino gave the Black Keys their rise, selling millions of records over the world. Naturally, this success gave way to a bit of overindulgence and oversaturation. Every album thereafter added more production, more instruments, and seemed written only to make a hit or achieve, the much easier goal of scoring an ad. The fans became jaded, the shows got expensive, the tours were cancelled, and the management was fired. That's the fall in our narrative, right? We're just making it really basic. The stage is then set perfectly for a redemption arc. Picture this: Auerbach and Carney move back into their little Akron, Ohio garage, smash out 10 simple, overdriven pentatonic blues rock singles, call it something knowing like The Big Come Down, a cute, wink to their 2002 debut, play some secret club shows across the states to build hype, and boom, comeback achieved. Fuck it. To really nail the whole we needed to rediscover ourselves bullshit. Let's say they even hired Rick Rubin to do whatever people say is so vital, which I think is like chat on the phone and send an engineer to hit record. Anyway, despite how obvious that whole thing was, the shrewd businessmen of Black Keys Inc. didn't do it. No, instead, they called a bunch of pop songwriters to churn out an unremarkable sepia toned, distant cousin to the last record called No Rain, No Flowers. And I suppose they kind of got the knowing title right, at least. I never have an issue with bands like trying new things or attempting to grow or evolve. I just think you need to have some sort of semblance of like who you are and then who you want to be when you try these things. Listening to Flowers, I'm completely confused as to where the band are aiming. At points it's faux disco, other times it's geriatric soul, and occasionally it sprinkles some pop rock into the mix. And it's interesting because ostensibly the band has applied the same strategy as they did on Ohio Players. Let's invite a bunch of seasoned professionals to co-write a new batch of songs. However, whereas Players saw the band bring in artists who'd forged a career with their own distinct musical voice, on Flowers, they've brought in professional songwriting experts, writers who have built a career as, hired guns in the background. The fact this record lacks any of the sort of vibrancy that made Ohio Players half interesting shows to me that it's not really the songwriting the Keys need support with. It's like the flavor, the texture, the voicing. Among the songwriters drafted for this record, there are names like Scott Storch, Daniel Tashian, Rick Knowles, and Desmond Child. They're heavy hitters that between them have given hits to the likes of 50 Cent, Kiss, Ricky Martin, Dido, all that songwriting gravitas. And you know what the best songs on this record are? A Little Too High and Down to Nothing. These are songs co-written with Tommy Brennick from the Budos Band, Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings, guitarist Pat McLaughlin, and Leon Michels from the El Michels Affair. Artists with distinct style. They aren't conjuring chord progressions in a lab for maximum radio effectiveness. They're adding a smoky but laid back and intense R&B groove that makes the perfectly serviceable songwriting of the Keys actually sound interesting. Perhaps next time the Black Keys will take those obvious signals and do an album only with Brennick, McLaughlin, and Michels as collaborators. But as we've already kind of established, for a band who pride themselves on their business savvy, they're pretty good at ignoring the easy wins and the home runs. Yeah, for me, this album just didn't really hit. So I think I would give it a 4.2, a little bit lower than the last one. Like I said, a higher players just felt a little bit more exciting. This just still it seems like, yeah, I don't really know what they were thinking. 4.2. Not that I'm a huge Black Keys guy. This is fairly consistent with the last few things they put out, but I hold out hope. Let me know what you think. If you're a Black Keys fan, you might be a bit frustrated with this review, but tell me why in the comments. I'm sure you will. Check out my newsletter down below for, like I say, reviews on a wider range of artists and genres. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Time to knock it on the head. Take care. There you go. Cheers, mate. Bye.